Hi, welcome to Veronica Live. I'm Veronica here over in Panama City today, and I have a special guest with me today, Derek Silver. He's actually an FSU law student over in Tallahassee, and he's pretty much an expert on Israel. So today I wanted to discuss Israel and why it's important to America and why we must remain friends with Israel. So welcome, Derek.
Thanks for having me, Veronica.
Well, I'm so curious about everything Israel. I know that when I was in college, I had to take a Israel culture, society, and history class. And today, I wish I had remembered more of the facts because it is so complex researching this topic. So I wanted to ask you, because why is Israel important to America?
Well, a number of reasons. One, they're the only democracy in the Middle East. Right now, they're the only free society over there that protects minorities' rights. The only place in the Middle East where the Christian population is increasing right now is Israel. Two, they're a really strong ally for us in terms of combating terrorism and keeping Americans safe. If you'll know, a lot of the intelligence that was gathered to prevent ISIS attacks, the Israelis gathered that intelligence and they share it with us. Post 9/11, when al-Qaeda terrorists were going to use liquid explosives on airlines, the reason that plot was disrupted actually was that the Israelis discovered the plot and they shared the intelligence with us. And finally, I mean, if you think of it, in terms of the military aid that we give them, a lot of that comes back to us. So, for example, we fund missile defense in Israel because Israel suffers from a vulnerability of missiles from Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and what have you. And their data and their development process is shared with the United States, which is really important when you look at what we're dealing with now with North Korea in terms of missile defense.
Right. Well, I think one of the most interesting quotes that I read in my research was, Israel is the largest American aircraft carrier in the world that cannot be sunk, does not carry even one American soldier, and is located in a critical region for American national security. And that was good old Alexander Haig back in the day said that, and that still stands today. I mean, Israel is just so important, and I know too that the U.S. has pledged to give $38 billion to Israel over the next 10 years to buy some plus up Israelis military, and they're going to buy F-35s and buy more weapons to defend themselves. Because I know, looking at the map, you forget where Israel is. They're surrounded by all kinds of enemies.
Yeah, absolutely. So the $38 billion is part of what's called the 10-year Memorandum of Understanding. The last one was with President Bush, and the previous administration signed a 10-year Memorandum of Understanding. And so it's supposed to give the Israelis the money to buy the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. A lot of that's also going to go into missile defense. There's certain other things that the Israelis are developing too. One of them that I think the U.S. Army just contracted to buy is a special system that actually blows up rockets that are headed towards vehicles before they can hit the vehicle. And the U.S. Army is actually supposed to begin testing that. That was also developed in Israel. So There's a lot of really good things coming from that Memorandum of Understanding going to Israel. And what a lot of people don't know is the overwhelming majority of that $38 billion that the United States gives to Israel creates American jobs because the Israelis spend most of that on American companies.
Right. I know we have awesome free trade agreements between ourselves. I was shocked at all the trade. We buy a lot of precious stones from Israel. We also buy medical equipment. So we're constantly doing business with Israel, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're also the startup capital of the world as well, which is great for us. You know, a lot of American innovators go to Israel to learn about their technology. A lot of the Israeli technology you'll find in your everyday life, the chips that power your phones, the Intel chips in your computer, a lot of those were developed in Israel as well. So we benefit tremendously from a robust economic relationship and a free trade agreement.
Well, I want to educate our listeners, just so they know, Israel has 8.5 million folks that live there. 6.4 million are Jews, and then 1.7 are Arab. So how has that been? You know, can you tell us a little bit of the history of how Israel was formed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the United Nations agreed originally in 1947 to a partition plan. So they were partitioned what was called the British Mandate of Palestine at the time. That was partitioned into two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. And the background for that is two things. First, the Jewish people have always had a connection, a very deep connection to the land of Israel. I mean, if you look at, for example, the City of David excavations that are going on in Jerusalem right now, it proves that there are thousands of years of Jewish connection to the land. You can dig up coins from different temple periods. You can find all kinds of stuff. And secondly, the British Empire promised the Jewish people a homeland. So the partition land was agreed to by the United Nations. Unfortunately, in 1948, you had all of the neighboring Arab states decide that they were going to war with Israel to crush the Jewish state. Mm-hmm. Well, what ended up happening is the Israelis actually defeated the surrounding Arab armies and carved out their own state. Which is a lot of where you hear about the displacement of Palestinians and what have you, which was really unfortunate because the Arab armies really tried to encourage the Palestinian population to resist the Israeli military. They encouraged a lot of them to leave so that it would be easier for the Arab armies to wipe out Israel. And, fortunately, Israel prevailed in that war of self-defense. They really had no choice but to fight a war when everyone around them wanted to kill them. And just to give you an idea of who some of these people were, in addition to the Arab armies, I mean, there's no denying that the point of it was to, quote, throw the Jews into the sea. One of the leaders of the militant Palestinian movement during that war was Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, who actually had ties to Hitler. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to push all of the Jews out of Israel and into the sea.
So will we ever get past this conflict? Because it still exists today. You hear of talk of making it a two-state nation, a one-state nation. But researching, Iran funds all these terrorists to come and do bad things, and Iran has said that Israel is the cancer. It's a cancer that they want to get rid of, and they've also said they just want to, I guess, annihilate all Jews. So what are your thoughts on that? Can we ever get past this, or is it the location of Israel with all these countries around it? Lebanon, we've got Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. There's just so much around Israel.
I would delve into two things. The first thing is I think Israel's relations with Arab states now is separate from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So it's two issues. I think on the side of the Israel's relationships with its Arab neighbors, Israel has peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, which it didn't have in 48 and 67. And the Jordanians and the Egyptians will keep those peace treaties intact with Israel because it's in their interest to do so. Egypt relies a lot on Israeli military cooperation to fight ISIS in the Sinai. The Jordanian water supply is dependent on cooperation with Israel because Jordan has drought issues. There's a lot of economic relationships there. Even under the table, Israel has ties with Saudi Arabia and a lot of the other Arab countries because they realize that Iran is the bigger threat to them, not Israel. They're not worried about Israel, bombing Saudi Arabia, but they are worried about Iran trying to topple the Saudi monarchy. In terms of the Israeli-Palestinian issue, I don't see a way that there really is a two-state solution. What you hear in the international body are, for example, the issue of quote-unquote settlements. Well, when you look at what a settlement is or what they define that in the UN, Jerusalem is considered a settlement because it was over the line of the pre-1967 line. And so if you build an extra bedroom in your apartment in Jerusalem, that's considered settlement expansion. And, when you go there, you realize that a lot of the people that live over the said Green Line are people who work side by side with Arabs. And, Palestinian laborers, they won't say it publicly because they'll get killed by their government, the Palestinian Authority. They prefer to work on Israeli settlements or in communities over the Green Line, Judea and Samaria, because the pay is 3 times what you would get in the Palestinian Authority. And then you have to look at what your peace partner is. When you look at the conflict, you have Gaza, which is ruled by Hamas, which is the Palestinian version of Al-Qaeda. They lobbed 4,000 rockets into Israel in the 2014 war. And then you've got the Palestinian Authority, which, the Obama administration would say is moderate, but, they pay salaries to terrorists. The more Israelis you murder, you automatically get money as a reward from the Palestinian Authority. And they teach kids in their textbooks to kill Jews.
So explain what the green line is for our listeners.
Sure. So after the 1948 War of Independence, the green line is where Israel's borders were considered to be at the time. So if you were to look at a map of pre-1967 Israel, the green line had Jerusalem being controlled by Jordan, and it had the Golan Heights in the hands of Syria. I mean, those are the two major strategic things to understand. And so in 1967, what you had when a man named Gamal Abdel Nasser was the president of Egypt at the time, the Arab armies were again massing to wipe Israel off the map. And Israel launched a preemptive strike. And in 6 days, they destroyed the entire Syrian and Egyptian Air Force, and they recaptured Jerusalem and the Golan Heights. Those two things are extremely significant. Number one, and Judea and Samaria as well. Those three things are very significant. Number one, if you look at the areas of Judea and Samaria that Israel captured, that's all high ground overlooking Tel Aviv, which is Israel's most populous city. And what would happen if the Israelis didn't have that high ground is terrorists could lob rockets right into Tel Aviv. Jerusalem, obviously, being united was huge. It's the eternal undivided capital of Israel, the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, all of those things. You know, the Israelis were able to visit and pray at the Western Wall for the first time in a while. And then finally, the Golan Heights, which, you know, we can discuss later when we talk about Iran, overlooks the entire, all of the agricultural community that Israel has in the north. And so what the Syrians used to do when they had the Golan Heights is they would put artillery on the Golan Heights and they would shell Israeli farmers day and night and launch terror attacks from there. So Israel capturing that was huge in terms of maintaining the safety for its citizens.
Wow. Very interesting. So I have a current day question. President Trump, when he was running, said that one of his goals was to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He hasn't done that yet, but why do you think that's important?
I think for two reasons. I think under the previous administration, the Obama administration, we've kind of thrown our friends to the wolves to embrace our enemies. And I think when you do something like moving the Israeli embassy to Jerusalem, it shows that we're ready to stand with our friends again. Mm-hmm. I think number two, when it comes to dealing with the issue with the Palestinians and the Arab world, it sends a message to them that Israel's here to stay. You can't reject that anymore. And when you recognize the Israeli capital as Jerusalem by moving the embassy there, you basically tell the Palestinians, look, if you actually want peace, you need to start making the concessions to have peace, you know, or otherwise, you know, you're going to lose your opportunity. And three, you know, Israel's a sovereign democracy, the only democracy in the region, and they have the right to determine their own capital.
Yeah, I think that's important. Very, very important. And I know, let's chat about your Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu. He's very, very interesting. He was educated at MIT. Apparently, he got his bachelor's and his master's in 2.5 years in my research, which seems amazing. He's just a very determined man. He also did a thesis at Harvard. And then following graduation, he worked at a consulting firm in Boston for 2 years. But he's had this most amazing career. He was in the Israeli Defense Forces as a commando. He's an author. He's written books on terrorism. He was he was representative of Israel at the UN. He's been the Prime Minister 4 times already. Is he the leader that Israel needs?
Yeah, I think he is. I think what was really interesting was, you know, when the Obama administration was trying to say, oh, you know, the majority of Israelis support the Iran deal, and Obama would try to belittle Prime Minister Netanyahu. The most interesting thing was when Netanyahu went into an election. So the Israeli government is it's a coalition government. So what you have is parliamentary process. So you have a proportional representation, the percentage of votes that you get from the public to serve, and the percentage of seats that you get in the parliament. And the right wing of the government, led by Netanyahu, actually came out on top. They pushed the Labor Party out of the government. And the reasoning behind that is because people in Israel care most about security. And they knew that the prime minister